With everyone on stay-at-home orders, I wanted to take some time to just talk about things that interest me and maybe get people talking about something that isn't depressing. So let's talk about existentialism, a philosophy that came into fashion around the 1940s. I picked existentialism because I'm something of a cheerful existentialist, sort of like Charlie Brown. Also, how people make decisions and choices is a fascinating subject that matters in some way to everything I think about, from game design to writing fiction and just how to be a decent human being. So, some background first. Three big names: Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Simone de Beauvoir. These three were all French. Camus was French-Algerian, which obviously plays some influence in maybe his best-known work of fiction, The Stranger. They all lived in France during World War II, specifically during the German occupation. Uh, while Sartre's Being in Nothingness is probably the most thorough explanation of existentialism, and given its size and heft, maybe the most thorough thing ever written, Camus' Myth of Sisyphus is a better entryway into existentialist thought. Beauvoir's most famous work is probably The Second Sex, which is a combination history of the oppression of women and feminist treatise. So anyway, you're probably thinking after all that, that sounds really depressing. We've got occupied France, World War II, Sisyphus, the oppression of women, and nothingness. But that's not what existentialism is about. Uh, Here, Sartre defines existentialism roughly with existence precedes essence. That is, the meaning of the world is determined by the way in which one acts and thinks about the world. Being in nothingness goes into more detail. I'm talking about a lot more detail. Let's think of it this way instead. Sartre also puts it like this: man is condemned to be free, which that can sound really depressing, but it's really just putting the world into a sort of a stark contrast, right? Existence is this giant ball of possibilities, and you have to choose between them. Even not choosing is a choice. And any choice you make is going to negate every other possible choice you could have made, good and bad. You have to decide what meaning to give the world based on what you know and believe about it to make your choices. And we're not going to get into what Sartre thinks you can know about the world because that gets very complicated and very deep. Anyway, existentialism says that you are in charge of determining what life means to you. And that's a heavy, scary, but also very liberating responsibility. You are condemned to be free. Knowing that your choices obliterate other possibilities can be terrifying. And in many cases, when you're aware of this, you realize that there just might not be a right decision. You have to choose between things, sometimes without knowing what the consequences will be, and sometimes even worse, you know what the consequences are going to be, both good and bad, to whatever decision you make or don't make. And existentialism puts that responsibility squarely on you. You have to decide how you want to make these choices, what choices you're going to make, and what values you put on the different choices. So it's saying, I can't tell you what you should value. Someone else can't tell you what you should value. You have to decide that. And when you decide that, you have to own that decision. It's a very heavy, but it's a very empowering burden. So there's a lot of other trappings that can come with existentialist thought, and you don't have to agree or even go into a lot of that other stuff. But if you do read some of these other works, you'll get a much more in-depth and more detailed view, and I may have sort of brushed over a couple of things. But the important thing that I wanted to take away from existentialist thought is that people need to understand how they make decisions and what goes into their decision making. Because I think if everyone took some time to look into not just how they make their decisions, but why they're making it, what do you value, how do you order your various goods, as some philosophical thought would put it, that I think will help people make better decisions that will be more in line with how your view and outlook of the world is, and might also just make you more aware of what it is you do actually value. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I might do this again, I might not. I just felt like it would be good to have a chance for people to get out there and talk about something that wasn't necessarily all depressing.